Hello again, everybody. This is Commander Jay and Trax from the Loose Screws podcast. We're coming up for part 2 of the combat tutorials. I shared the first part with a limited audience and got a little bit of feedback just to make sure that there wasn't anything I was totally missing. So if you enjoyed the first one, I think you'll probably enjoy this one as well. We're going to start with a whole lot of talking and playing around with ship builds. And we're going to cover engineering, more advanced stuff, and eventually when we'll get into some combat demos, and I think I'll go to some conflict zones today to get into some higher level NPC combat. So first of all, if you're watching this part 2, I'm assuming you've seen part 1. If you have not, go find it. I'll make sure there's a link in the description and so on. This is still for beginners, but I'm attempting to answer a lot of common questions that we see in the Loose Screws Discord. And we're going to touch on everything, like I said, engineering, some more advanced things, how to tune the ship better, and all the fun things, the whole new world of things that opens up when you can get into engineering. We'll also go over power play modules, and then do a combat demo. So just a note, what we won't be covering, this is focused on combat, so this is not going to be a full rundown of all engineering. I'm not going to talk about all the power play modules, just the ones that I think are that you should actually be considering thinking about combat-wise. Again, combat. I'm not going to talk about Thargoids or Thargoid combat. That is a different topic. Yet another higher level of combat, essentially, and requires a lot more kind of different stuff, whole different unlocks and stuff. So yeah, essentially combat focused, and I won't be. I'm not a great PvP pilot, so I don't feel like I'm in a position to be giving a whole lot of advice there. There are some things to do with engineering that I'll talk about, but I'm not going to be doing PvP demos today or anything like that, and I really don't think I would exactly be the right person for that anyway. So that's what we're not covering. Okay, so we're going to talk about further optimizing the ship, core module engineering first. And I think I will pop into Coriolis for this, so let's do that now. Okay, so here we are. Core module engineering for combat. Now that we're getting into engineering, before we were basically saying A-rate everything, use the military armor. Once we get into engineering, things get slightly more complicated. So in that regard, like here, for example, this is an FDL, a Fer-de-Lance build that I have and use pretty regularly. This is a good bounty hunter, pretty good all-around ship. You can do conflict zones in this. I might actually pick this one to do the conflict zones a little later. Okay, so here's what we end up doing most of the time with ships for combat builds. We're still A-rating most modules, but we can engineer them now. So skipping over the armor for a second, power plant for combat, I try to use armored whenever possible. Armored does make the module heavier, as 20% mass at grade 5, but you get a better heat efficiency. You get a lot better integrity, so the module can take more damage without going down, and the power generation goes up a little bit. If at all possible with my combat builds, I try to use armored. Sometimes you need more power for the build, and you end up having to use overcharged instead. But if we switch this to overcharged, you'll see that what we get is much lowered integrity and worse heat efficiency, but you get a ton of power generation out of it. So, it depends. Like I said, I really like to use armored because I want I want this ship to be very tough. I want this ship to, when the shields go down, I don't want to worry about that power plant taking too much damage and getting knocked out. But sometimes you got to do what you got to do. So for this build, we've managed to squeeze the build into armored with the thermal spread special effect. Just again, knocking that heat down. Any bonus I can get to my static heat generation, the better I feel. Thrusters, these are always going to be the biggest you can get, A-rated, dirty, mod, and drag drives. Pretty well always. There's going to be a few cases where we're wanting a combat build to be very, very light, or if we're going to do something like a stealth build. I have done some ships that like don't have shields and are made to try to stay in silent running sometimes, and just generally stay very cool. And in those cases, sometimes we do break out the clean drives, which again is a sort of a different mod for increasing the power of your thrusters, but it's doing so differently. It's boosting the optimal multiplier instead of optimal mass, and your thermal load goes way down. This is can be very advantageous. And then after that, drag drives or drive distributor are two different experimentals that we might use. Generally, so let's see. So when we're looking at clean, we're increasing the optimal multiplier. Drag drives would increases the thermal load. Drive distributors is probably what I would pick if I'm trying to go for minimal heat. It's going to be a little bit of a bonus without the heat, whereas drag drives increases the power of the thrusters but also increases the heat a little bit. But for the most part, for combat builds, we're going for dirty and drag. This is the highest powered thrusters you can get. Frameshift drive, I tend to use A-rated with the same increased range mod. Some people take this opportunity to lighten their ship with this module, because if it's a combat build, we're not going to care much about jump range, but depending on what you're doing, where you are in the game, if you have a fleet carrier to carry you around, then you can probably get away with this. Or if you want to take the time to transfer your ships over to where you want to do your bounty hunting or whatever. But if you need them to jump at all, you can squeeze a little jump range into this, and it's not that big a deal. But like on this FDL, for example, my range laden is 17.65. You could use like a really small FSD on this. So look at this. This, if I put a 2E FSD, actually that'd be a terrible thing for a combat ship. So let's assume that we want it to have some integrity at least. 2B, basically just undersize this. Even if you used a 2A, I can get my laden range down to 1.5 light years. I mean, this ship can't even jump to a different star. It's just going to be able to go into super cruise. So you will have to go into a different ship in order to move it from system to system, or onto a fleet carrier. Some people do that. I tend to, let's see, what did we get out of this? If I undersized it, I'm looking at speed. So 408 and 549 boost. And if I have the 4A, yeah, I mean, I'm losing almost nothing in speed for this mod. So yeah, I really don't feel like it's worth it to undersize the FSD. Some ships are going to be more sensitive to weight, however. If it's a very, very light, small ship, it's going to be more sensitive to weight. I usually pick A-rated life support, and then I give it the lightweight mod to take some weight off there. For distributors, we're always going biggest A-rated we can. Charge enhanced super conduits. This is always what we want for a combat build. Weapon focus, things like that, they just take too much away from the other things. So this is basically what I want on all my ships all the time, combat or otherwise. But this is where we're going to be. Just want to check my time here. Okay, so Yeah, these are the mods that we always use on every distributor. Now sensors, this is another place where you might have a different opinion. You can use a 4A and lightweight it. That would be the mod I would want to use on an A. So here we have a range 6.72, and that's a 2-ton module. I tend to prefer starting with a D-rated sensor and putting long range mod on it. Now it weighs more, but again, like, let's compare what we're getting out of this thing for straight line speed. So let's do the A with lightweight. It's a lot less mass, only 2 tons, but I'm going 407 and 548. With my preferred thing, I'm using long range on a D-rated sensor. It weighs 8 instead of 2 tons, but the range is a lot longer, 8.82 K, and I've lost 2 meters a second-ish. So that's not that big a deal. Again, some ships, if it's a super light build, if it's a courier made to go so fast, combat like jousting courier. I think my carrier's completed its jump. Yeah. Very good. So, if it's a super super light build, then that might be what you want to go with instead, is an A-rated with lightweight. But those are the two combats. Combos. You A-rate a sensor, then you give it lightweight, or you D-rate a sensor and give it long range. You get a longer scanning range out of the D-rated, but it weighs a little bit more. Those are my preferences. I'm just gonna find my carrier. There she is. And head off in that direction so I can get my other ships. Okay, so that's the core modules. Is there anything else I want to add to that? Oh, the armor, of course. So for the most part, if you're used to using military, that's perfectly fine. But now that we're engineering, we can actually get better total hull numbers by using some different armor, and that's where we're going to get into reactive, and then we're going to combine that with some other things in order to balance that out. So I guess this is as good a place as any to talk about resistances. Last time we talked about the default resistances of everything, because that's the best we can do without engineering. But now that we can engineer things, we can change our resistances with engineering mods, and this is a lovely thing. So I'm gonna do a little comparison here. I'll land. So let's pretend that we had this military armor, and I'm actually going to get rid of my other hull module here too. All right, so this is like the default like military grade. So this is like your typical upgrade on the armor of this FDL. So absolute is 788. It's pretty weak to explosive, a little bit weak to kinetic, and then it's neutral to thermal. And so those are, you see here where my cursor is, those are the numbers. So to get the maximum hull numbers out of any ship, including engineering, what we're going to do is we're actually going to go for the reactive surface composite. This is always the most expensive thing on the whole ship. This module, the reactive armor, costs so much, especially on really expensive ships like the Cutter. It's ludicrous. Now you'll see that the total hull number did not change. However, the resistances did. So we're with the reactive, we're starting with a 20% bonus to explosive and 25% bonus to kinetic, but we have this minus 40 to thermal. So on its face, this is sort of not great. You encounter a lot of thermal damage out there. So how are we going to fix this? Well, we are going to add we're going to add a hull reinforcement, and the D way less and have the same charge. So you always want the D hull reinforcement. Now, if I have a ship with multiple hull reinforcements going on, I'm always going to pick the smallest one first, and I'm going to modify this with thermal resist. And that, as we see, has sort of balanced our resistances out quite a bit. So now we've eliminated a little bit of our bonus to explosive and kinetic, but our thermal is now very high. And of course, the absolute did go up a little bit because of this small bonus. Now I like to throw layered plating on as the special effect. You could probably do kind of whatever you want, but this is just to kind of further balance, because explosive ended up being the lowest resistance after all this. And really what my goal here is to maximize the balance between those resistances, and then kind of push them up a bit. Again, we're keeping track of our absolute number, because that's absolute damage is what we will receive from 60% of plasma shots is absolute, and then anytime you're like crashing into something or getting rammed, that counts as absolute as well. So now we see our numbers have gone up quite a lot just with this small hull package that only weighs 1 ton. It only added 120 raw armor, but because we put this resistance mod on it, we've changed our numbers significantly compared to the military grade by itself. Let's pick out a different ship, actually. Let's pick out a chieftain. This is something that's usually a little bit more armor-based. Okay, so here's a blank chieftain. And I'm gonna do up the armor how I might. So reactive surface composite. Oh, by the way, the reactive, I always put heavy duty and deep plating on. The reactive gets heavy duty deep plating, so this is our starting point. And once again, we've got the big bonuses to explosive and kinetic, but a big minus to thermal. So that puts our absolute numbers are pretty good, but our thermal is definitely the lowest. So with my size 1 slot, this might not be exactly how I do with this ship, but for right now, just to build this out, I'm gonna take a size 1 hull and mod it with thermal, and then layered to bring back just a little bit of that explosive. So now we're closer to balanced. Everything's positive resistance at least, and our numbers are looking good. So now let's fill in the rest. Now this is a ship that has 3 restricted slots, so you can put cell banks in here, and sometimes I do, but for right now we're going to put some size 4 hulls. So we did the smallest one is thermal mod. The rest of them are going to be heavy duty deep plate. And every time we do this, our resistances go up a bit, as you can see, and our absolute goes up quite a lot, because this is adding 624 raw armor now that it's modded. And we can do this again with another package, and again, heavy duty deep plate. And now we've got the resistances are now getting into that kind of really good zone. We're above 30%. Pushing the resistances much past 50% might start to get a little detrimental, just because, again, look at the difference between my damage type numbers versus my absolute. I don't want to forget about that, because that's where I'm vulnerable to things like ramming and to a certain extent plasma shots. Okay. So that's the basic principle of how we're gonna clean up hulls. So I'm gonna just check my notes here. So we should talk about shield types. Once again, why don't I flip back to my FDL here? Okay, here's my built-out FDL. The resistances issue is the same for shields. As a baseline, shields are really weak to thermal, just like the reactive was. For shields, there's a few different ways we can do it. Let's see, what other builds do I have? So this might not be totally up to date. Yeah, this is not a totally up to date build for my Corvette, but this is fine to show this off. Okay, so here I've set up a prismatic shield. Prismatic is a power play module, but this is a shield that has a really slow recharge time, but higher absolute power, absolute hit points, essentially. So what I've done with this is I've put the biggest shield I can, and I'm essentially modifying it for, I put low draw on this probably to get it I was probably worried about the power plant. Because I already had to overcharge this power plant. So this is a build that is a very high energy build, so I needed to make some compromises here in order to fit all these guns on. But for the prismatic shield, so we went with reinforced. Reinforced increases all the resistances somewhat, and then the optimal strength goes way up at the cost of increased power draw, and drops the regeneration rate even more than it was before. So we don't care about regen rate on a prismatic shield because it's already so slow. Look at this. It's going to take over 30 minutes to recharge this shield. So that's just never going to happen in combat. We don't worry about that. If this shield ever goes down, it's done. We're not going to worry about getting it back. So we just make the absolute numbers as high as we can. And to do that, we put the reinforced mod directly on the shield generator, and then I did a bunch of heavy-duty supercapacitor shield boosters. With shield boosters, I'm always going to use, if they're designed for heavy-duty, so increasing total shield strength, then I'm going to use the A-rated because that's the highest power. It makes them very heavy. So this isn't going to be great for small ships, but for large ships, 14 tons of mass is nothing. So we don't care. So heavy-duty supercapacitors, I pretty much use supercapacitor as the experimental on shield generators all the time. But there's another thing that you can do. So with this one, because I used reinforced here, I needed to boost up the thermal resistance. The thermal resist was low on this shield, and so I added some thermal resist with thermo block. I don't think this is how my Corvette is actually built right now. I would probably still put supercapacitors on those if I were to rebuild this right now. Let's see what that... Yeah, I think those numbers did go up a little bit here. I think supercapacitor is always the experimental that I would recommend on any shield. But you see that I've used an E-rated shield booster for this, and that's because I was trying to stay under the power cap. E used the least power and weigh the less for shield boosters. You can also use a D, which has a little bit more power, a little bit more energy usage, and a little bit more weight. But if you're doing any of the mods that affect resistances, any of them besides heavy duty, then you can get away with not using an A-rated module to save power, because for both the A-rated and the D-rated, let's use an E, the resistance is going to be exactly the same. So basically just using whichever one you kind of feel like if you want to save the weight or something like that. So this is an example of how we might build out a prismatic shield for maximum power, not caring at all about the recharge. Now my FDL is a biweave build. I'm basically recommending for combat that you're either using biweave or prismatic. I don't really use A-rated shields. I either want that recharge time to be as quick as possible, or I want the power to be totally maxed out. And the amount of power room you have in your power plant might help you decide which you're going to use. But generally, I use biweaves more than I use prismatics. I really only would ever consider a prismatic in a ship that I can fit shield cell banks in order to recharge them, since they're never going to recharge on their own. But for biweaves, the recharge time is much quicker, and so we will maximize that by going in the other direction. Instead of raw power, we're going to instead care more about resistances. Now, this FDL is kind of an in-between build, so maybe I should pick something different. The Courier, here we go. So here's something where it's entirely resistance-based. This is also a lightweight build. So this is a combat build where I stuck with the lightweight alloy. By the way, here's a little sneak trick. You can put heavy duty and deep plate mod on your lightweight alloy, and it doesn't change the mass at all because the mass was 0 to begin with. So even though we see a mass increase of 30%, 30% of 0 is still 0. So this you can do to your exploration ships too, but this is a speedy build. We're trying to go for that max speed, max maneuverability. We're aiming to not get hit very much, but we've squeezed a hell of a lot of shield in here. I've done that with Guardian shield reinforcement packages. This is an unlockable module, and of questionable use, but I think this is one of its good uses on a small ship where the absolute power of the shield is low to begin with. The reason being that these Guardian modules don't increase the shield by a percentage the way boosters do, but instead they increase by raw megajoules number. So the size 2 is always going to be 105 megajoules, and the size 1 is 61, and so on. They come in a lot of different sizes, and these consume power. So you got to be able to fit it in the power plant. I'm certain that I overcharged this power plant because I'm using a size 3A to make it smaller. Yeah, and I overcharged it just as much as I could to fit all this power in here. Okay, but concentrating on the shield, it's a bi-weave, so I've used pretty much always on a bi-weave. We never want to use reinforced because it lowers our recharge rate. Broken regen rate, it increases our power usage, and sure, it makes the shield stronger, but we've got better ways of doing that. I want to keep that regen rate as high as possible, and to do that, I want to make sure my absolute number doesn't go too high, but in order to get my shield strength up, I'm going to concentrate on those resistances. In this case, it looks like I've put low draw on here. I usually experiment in Coriolis between low draw or fast charge. And so see what this did, see what fast charge did to our recovery and recharge times. So this is the time to go from when it was the shield is totally broken to when it will come back online at 50%. And then this is from 50% to 100 after it has come back. So those can sometimes react differently. Now with low draw, because it lowers the distributor draw, sometimes in this case, it looks like fast charge actually does recharge the shield faster compared to low draw. However, I'm already over power on this ship, and so I'm in this case I'm using low draw so that I only have to turn off my frameshift drive booster and my fuel scoop when I'm deploying weapons. But you can play around with this. Sometimes I find a build where low draw actually causes the shields to regenerate faster because of the system's capacitor consumption. So that's worth playing around with. But for bi-weaves, I pretty much always put thermal resist on the shield itself. And then let's go ahead and get rid of all my shield boosters so you can see what that would do. And I'm gonna actually get rid of all these. Let's pretend this is a normal ship. So here's the raw shield. This is a bi-weave, the biggest we can fit in this courier, and we've put thermal resist on it. And we've got this absolute number here, but as you can see, all of our damage type numbers are higher because of the resistances. We've actually got really good resistances already. The weakest one's kinetic, but that's still almost 30%, and that feels pretty good, especially since this ship should be very difficult to hit with kinetic because it's so fast. We're much more worried about missiles that can track us, could possibly hit us, and then thermal, like a lot of the lasers being hit scan weapons, will be able to hit us the best. So that's where I would really want to make sure my numbers were high. Now from here, I don't want to boost this absolute number if I can help it, because that keeps my recharge time very low. So I'm not going to use an A-rated booster, and I'm not going to use heavy-duty mod. I'm going to use Ds or Es. So let's try an E, and I'm going to use, since I balance the resistances with thermal on the shield, I'm just going to use resistance augmented. So this increases all the resistances, and then of course super capacitors is always my favorite mod, because all the rest of them you're sacrificing one thing for the other. And I don't really think we need that. So resistance augment, my resistances went up even more, and my total numbers have gone up, but my absolute number has gone up very little. So my recharge time is still high, or I should say low. My recharge speed is high. Let's do another one. Let's grab another E-rated and put resistance augmented on it. And now our recharge has only gone up a little bit because we've only raised, we're still under 400 total, but you can see that I'm getting essentially right around double that in my resistance numbers because of what's going on over here with my resistances. And, we can keep going. We can put another E-rated, and these are all very light, so they're changing the speed of my ship by almost nothing. And so now we got resistances in some cases over 60%. So what does that mean for this ship? It means our shield recharge and recovery times are very quick, but our shield strength versus most weapons is quite strong, a lot stronger than this 350 raw number that we have. But that means that I am vulnerable to plasma. Do not get hit by plasma because 60% of that damage is absolute. And don't get rammed and don't crash into stuff. This shield will fall apart under absolute damage. However, to most standard weaponry, you're very, very strong. Okay. Look back at the notes. So that's resistances versus raw strength, and a bit about the shield types as far as biweave and prismatics go. Now, reducing incoming damage. One of the things that we're concentrating on, like this courier is a fast and light build. I'm intending to not be hit. I made sure my thermal resistance is pretty high because I am going to take some damage from lasers. Hit scan kind of lasers are going to be the best way to hit this ship because how easily I'm going to dodge. But I've also thrown a chaff launcher on here. Now, for small ships, a chaff launcher is going to do really, really well because scrambling those chaff scrambles gimbals. It makes it so that for the duration of the effect, anybody who's targeting you, their gimbaled weapons are going to swing all around wildly and not aim at you very well. Now, the hit profile on a small ship is very small, so it's going to be really effective for those gimbals to be scrambled on it. Something larger like my Corvette or something like that is very big. Even if I'm throwing chaff, I'm still probably going to take most of that damage from gimbaled weapons because I'm just such a big target. Even scrambled, the gimbals are going to be able to hit. So, it's, you figure out what kind of damage you're thinking you're going to receive, what kind of damage you're going to avoid and how, whether you're going to use chaff or evasion or a combination of things to avoid that incoming damage. Make sure you're resistant to the things that you probably won't be able to avoid, or just resistant to everything if you can help it. This courier was a bit of a specialized build, so I can go ahead and flip back to something that's more standard. Once again, this FDL. This is a pretty standard setup for FDL. You see FDL sometimes with prismatics on them, and with extremely high shield numbers. And in that case, like I said, I would go reinforced and like really high capacity on everything. Probably a couple of thermal resistant boosters to balance those resistances, but everything just really total numbers. In this case, I really do like having the biweave there. I've still thrown the cell banks on here because with the FDL, I really don't want to lose the shield at all if I can help it. And my whole numbers aren't nothing, but it's not really strong. I'm probably going to run if I lose the shield in this ship. I'm not going to stay in the fight and try to tank it out. So we've got cell banks on here, and I'm going to check my notes and make sure I'm not skipping over anything. Some ships you will feel okay about your hull. I have a chieftain build where the shield isn't nothing, but I'm kind of expecting to lose it in a heavy fight, and the hull underneath is much stronger. I'm going to be in there and let the biweave recharge and come back online maybe several times over the course of a fight. So those are just different kind of approaches based on the strengths of the ship and based on what I'm intending to do with it. But cell banks can recharge your shield. I don't see any reason not to use them on a biweave, although it's the thing that you kind of, I think, have to have in place if you're running prismatics. because you're never going to recharge that thing on its own. So you really want to use these cell banks before it goes down to keep it up. And I've kind of using that same approach and theory here, even though this is a bi-weave FDL build. I have 2. Now you can put 2, they don't have to be the same size, but it's nice on the FDL that it can be built this way. You can flip these things around too and use a smaller shield and more cell banks, more large cell banks. The thing about them is that if you look at this number on Coriolis, total megajoules, so this is like if I fire all 4 cells, I'll be adding a total of 544 megajoules to this ship. Sometimes, you can build this with like the larger cell banks or something like a cutter where, your largest slots you actually fill with huge cell banks and then use a smaller shield. So most of your shield strength is actually in those banks, not in the shield itself. And you're just going to be using banks a lot. But it ends up having a total strength that is much higher overall than front loading more into the shield and less into the cell banks. That requires more tending, right? So it's, in a sense, I guess maybe it's a higher skilled way to build the ship, because in order to get that maximum shield strength, you have to use your cell banks. You have to keep that in mind. You have to keep on, you have to keep on that. And you can't have them canceled, which we'll get into later. So with the shield cell banks, I have 2 on the ship. You don't have to have 2, but if you have 2, you can double bank. You can use them at the same time. If you're doing that, you're going to want to have a heat sink launcher, because the heat is going to be crazy trying to fire 2 cell banks at a time. If you don't have heat sinks, you can sometimes you can build your ship to get away with 1 at a time without a heat sink and just kind of absorb that heat. That is going to be made easier by the engineering mods. So for this, since I'm planning on double banking in this ship, I've used the rapid charge mod and then recycling cell. This mod is kind of the idea behind using rapid charge and recycling is to lower the time that the cell bank is active for, and I'm intending to use the heat sink to clean that up, to clean up the heat, because the heat is all going to get dumped into you very, very fast. The reason to lower the time is because there's a weapon that people can use against you that will cancel the cell banks. It's a modification on the railgun. They can cancel up to like 90% of your shield's recharge, which can be devastating, especially if you've built the ship so that most of its energy is actually in the cell banks. This is a much more balanced build, like I said, on this FDL, where we're letting the shield do some of its own recharging, but we have the cell banks kind of for those emergencies where we want to stay in the fight for just a couple more minutes or something like that. And to do that double banking, basically what we do is we fire the heat sink, we wait a second or 2 or whatever it's going to take for that heat on the ship to get down to 0, and then really quickly we just bam, we fire the shield cell bank twice. And since there's 2 modules, it'll fire one and then the other in quick succession. And doing it this way, as long as you're not generating a ton of heat on the ship itself at the same time, like if I were firing my plasma accelerators and railguns and stuff, as long as I'm not generating a ton of heat, I really shouldn't take much, if any, heat damage. But you can. A little heat damage isn't that big a deal. With most combat builds, we're not using a bunch of lightweight modules. Lightweight mod lowers the integrity of things, so if you did have a lot of lightweight modules, you may find that heat damage will quickly damage those modules and they might start malfunctioning, but we usually don't. We're usually keeping our ships pretty tough in this case. So I'm checking my notes again. Okay. Power priorities, I think I talked about this last time, but making sure we can escape. I don't have this ship built correctly. I didn't set up the power priorities here in this at all. Let's see if I can do that. So basically, I'm going to try to get my priority 1 to all fit under 40%. And anything related to shields or guns I am going to have in power priority 2, including the generator itself, because what I'm thinking about is if my power plant gets damaged, gets shot out down to 0, it will only generate 40% of its total power. So here's that 40% line. So now with the power priorities that I've selected, everything that's in 1 will still work even if my power plant has been shot out. So that's thrusters. Let's see. Where's my FSD frameshift drive is 3. Oh, that's not great. So let's kick that into 1. Oh, see, this build is not great. I'm using too much power with this my kill warrant scanner. So if I turn off the kill warrant scanner and maybe my interdictor, so let's see, frameshift drive can be 1 now. So this is much more the way I would set this up if this was going to be a PvP build, because I'm not that worried about NPCs shooting out my power plant, but players would know to do that. So this is how I would set up this ship if I knew I was going to be engaging with players. Probably disable that kill warrant scanner that gets the power usage under what I need it to be. So now if my power plant gets shot out, I can still run my FSD, I can still escape. My thrusters still work, etc. So anyway, yeah, that's your escape plan. Make sure that stuff works if nothing else does. And you can have, like I said, your shields, all your guns. In the case that this happens, your shield is already down. So any of your shield boosters, things like that, your cell banks, all that can be power priority 2, because we're not going to need that to be online by the time your power plant is shot out. Your guns, you're not going to be staying in the fight after your power plant is shut out. So your guns can be power priority 2. Pretty much anything. I mean, even sensors, we don't really need, but usually they don't use all that much power, like, because I usually use a D-rated sensor, like I said. So the distributor, you don't even really need that to be power priority 1. But if the distributor is offline, you can't change your pips. So it'll be stuck wherever it was when the distributor went offline. And that could be bad. In combat, you should be using your pips and managing them a lot. So you really do. I like that distributor to be online, even if my power plant is out, if I can help it. So, but it's not strictly speaking necessary. FSD and thrusters is technically all you would really need to get away. In that case. All right, back to the notes. Where are we? Okay, we've gotten to it. It's weapon engineering. Buckle up. So once again, I'm being focused on combat. This is probably going to be the biggest single thing, but I will try to go somewhat quickly. All these things are eminently Googleable, but I am trying to kind of put the important things in one place and give you just a general idea. So high energy versus low energy. We talked about this some in the first video. So, your low energy weapons, mostly kinetic, using those is a way to get a lot of damage without having to have a lot of pips and weapons. That same thing is going to stay true when we're engineering, but it also means that for weapons that have a typically low base energy consumption, we can use mods that increase that energy consumption without a whole lot of penalty, because they're all percentage based. So with a high energy weapon, we have the opposite. So lasers, beam lasers, or in this case, so I have plasma accelerators on this ship. Plasma accelerators always get efficient mod. Efficient really, it doesn't have any downsides. But it is truly necessary to not need just an enormous amount of power in your weapons capacitor. So this is really common for me for lasers, although there are some other options for lasers. For plasma, I'm always using efficient mod. I have played around with focused some, because focused mod, I'll show you, increases the projectile speed by like double. And that's significant when trying to land plasma shots, because it's a moving projectile that is on a fixed weapon. But it's not for me, like the power consumption was still too high, and it even increases your thermal load. But I really liked how the range went up, the damage fall off goes up. A lot of benefits to this focused mod. Likewise, long range does some of those same things. I don't think this, shot speed does go up, but there's more negatives. The fall off doesn't go up. Yeah, I don't see any reason to use long range, because to be honest, like hitting with a plasma shot at really long range is very difficult, and you actually got to connect to make this damage matter anyway. So the only other mod I've really ever considered, like I said, is focused, and the armor piercing goes up too, which helps. But if it's a size 3 or 4 plasma accelerator, that armor piercing is not really changing much anyway. So I don't know. Ultimately, I played around with them and I settled on all plasmas always get efficient mod. And then there's some, we'll talk experimentals a little later. And so let's talk about lasers. So let's pick out a beam laser on this huge hard point here. So this uses a ton of energy and it puts out a lot of damage. A pretty big amount of damage. There's different ways you can go with this. Efficient, I mean, these are mods that basically go for almost all the guns here. Efficient, once again, has no downsides. And it really will help a ton to be able to get that weapon to fit inside your power plant and be able to use it effectively without just having to have 4 pips in weapons all the time. Because everything goes down, all the power consumptions go down and the damage goes up a bit. It's hard to argue with that. Your damage over time stays higher if you need fewer pips in weapons, right? But there are some other options here for lasers. You pretty much would. I've never been able to effectively use overcharged. Just the thermals and the distributor draw is just much too high. The range on lasers is already so low that I think short range is crazy. I mean, your fall off is 0.6K. So compare that to efficient, which, well, I guess the fall off doesn't change at all, but the total range ends up going way down when you use short range. I really don't like that on lasers. If you were really just trying to get the heat to go down, sturdy can be nice. It makes the weapon really tough, and it increases the piercing. This is a little bit of a sneak attack. I think if you were to use this on a small hardpoint, increasing that piercing is going to make it do more damage to larger ships, and that's nice. I really end up thinking that the two that you're going to use the most is going to be efficient and long range for higher powered weapons. Long range does increase the power draw a little bit, but because the range goes way up, so look at that by default, 3K range with a damage fall off of 600 meters. If we switch this to long range, it goes out to 6K and no fall off all the way out to the end. So this can be effective to use on a ship. If you do this, you got to think that the way you're dealing damage is by being far enough away that they can't hit you back. And at 6K, there isn't that much out there that can return fire at you. If you're between 5 and 6K and controlling that range on your targets all the time. So that's a cool way to do it. I still end up usually using efficient on things like beam lasers or, any high energy weapon, plasma excel, all the time you use efficient, but for beams most of the time. There is this edge case. No, I'm going to save that. I was going to talk about thermal vent, but we're going to get to experimentals a little later. So let's flip it around. Let's use low energy weapons. So here's a multi-cannon. Because the energy usage on this is pretty low, we can get away with using overcharged. And overcharged is a monster mod. Damage goes up 70%. And all those negatives, distributor draw, thermal load, there's just not that much. Like the heat. Let's compare to stock. The heat per second 1.2. Let's put overcharged on it. It's still only 1.4. And let's remember that the base on the beam laser the heat per second was 10.6. So with the multi-cannon, even modded for overcharged, is still super low heat. So that's ends up being a really effective mod. There are times when you might want high capacity on a multi-cannon, but we'll get into that. I've seen people using long range on this. Again, using long range means the range on this, because it's longer than a laser to begin with, is 8K. The tricky part is going to be hitting things that far away, especially with a projectile that has a speed. It's not a hit scan, but the long range mod did increase your projectile speed by a lot, so that can be good. I've seen effective builds this way, so that's a kind of a secondary thing. But pretty much by default, I'm always going to use overcharged on multi cannons, frag cannons, these low energy kinds of things. So that's kind of the basics of low energy versus high energy weapons. And we talked about efficient mod, overcharged, long range, and focused. Those are standard across most of the weapons. A few of the other mods that you might sometimes see, short range does what you're thinking. It lowers that range, but it increases the damage. Typically the heat, I think, kind of goes up when we do that. So let's see what happens if we short range this multi-cannon. So for short range, we've increased the thermal load a lot. Your damage actually went up more than overcharged, but the range is cut in half. So the range is now only 2 clicks. That's tough. The fall off is still 1.8. So with a multi-cannon, that could be okay. But think about what managing that range. Because the damage is very high on short range. Look back at my notes. Sturdy, we actually talked about a bit. Rapid fire and high capacity. Rapid fire does increase your damage quite a lot, in the sense that you're just spending all of your ammo. So let's see, when we put rapid fire on this multi-cannon, okay, so it drops your damage a little bit, but don't be fooled too much by that, because your rate of fire has gone up almost 50%. So you're going to have an increase in damage output, but you spend your total ammo a lot faster, with the benefit of a reduced distributor draw. This is probably not something I would put on a low energy thing. I don't know. I've never really put this on a combat ship and had it work really well. But one place that I'm wanting to check that out and haven't so much yet is on pulse lasers. For whatever reason, pulse lasers with rapid fire, actually, the lower distributor draw and the increased rate of fire, my DPS, let's compare this to efficient, which is sort of a default that I would do for lasers. So for efficient, my DPS is 26.9. Where does this show me? DPE, so damage per megajoule of energy. This is a good way to think about the weapons you're loading onto your ship, because you can sort of compare how much energy are they consuming while they do more damage, and is that really worth it to you? So 11.3. This is with efficient mod and no experimentals. So if we use rapid fire, damage per energy actually goes down, but the damage per second goes up. So that might be good for you. And this is with a pulse laser, which will never run out of ammo. So we don't have to worry about that. It doesn't add some jitter. So once again, we wouldn't want to be using that at very, very long range, but that's an interesting little side thing that you might find use for at some point. High capacity is a mod that we'll typically use on missiles. That tends to be the best mod on any missiles. But I don't use it except if I'm making up for a special effect that reduces my ammo. Lightweight mod I'm pretty much not using on guns unless it's so that I can fit them onto an exploration ship or something. However, the lightweight mod is interesting for a few things. Particularly, there's this one experimental effect on a beam laser, and that's thermal vent. So let's do efficient thermal vent. So thermal vent, what this experimental effect does is when you're striking a target, it dumps your ship's heat into that target. It doesn't increase their heat, but it lowers yours, so you can cool your ship with it. And there's a lot of reasons to want to do that. It tends to be a very good experimental if you're using beam lasers in general. If you're wanting to do that, the thing about this is it vents heat out of your ship at the rate of its own heat generation. So actually, the most effective thermal vent beam laser isn't going to be the efficient mod because its thermal load is minus 60%. Lightweight is really interesting because the distributor draw goes down and the power draw goes down, but the heat generation does not go down. So with lightweight mod, our base heat is the same, and if we put thermal vent on there, we'll actually get more heat removal from your ship, more cooling effect. For a lot less energy because we are saving that distributor draw and stuff similar to the efficient mod. It's not increasing damage. This is something you could consider on if you're having small lasers on the ship just for the purpose of cooling. But it's something to think about since that mod does come up. Okay. Are we ready for experimentals? I think we are. So we started with thermal vent. That's one that is hard to have not heard about already. So the other kinds of experimentals that are related to thermal, you're going to see thermal shock and thermal conduit. Thermal shock imparts heat onto your target when you're striking them, shields or hull. It will increase that ship's heat. I don't use this all that much. It does. I think it adds a reduction in total damage. Maybe I rarely use that. It's not all that effective compared to the other things that you could put on most of these guns. Thermal conduit is another one that's going to increase the damage of the weapon when your ship's heat is high. So you could theorize a pretty effective build for this. By essentially hardening your ship against its own heat damage through things like module reinforcements and giving a lot of modules the sturdy modification, and then just overheating your ship and firing your weapons while your ship is overheated will do a lot of increased damage to your target. That could be fun. Let's see, oversize and flow control. These work for pretty much any weapon. So oversized increases damage at the penalty of a little bit of power draw. So if you can fit it into your power plant and it still works, oversized just increases the damage a little bit. That's all there is to it, nothing more. Flow control, kind of the opposite. It doesn't really have a downside. It just lowers the power draw of your weapon. Did I say lightweight on this? So flow control on let's pick out a weapon that I think it's a 10% reduction in power consumption. So that's off of your power plant. So you can use flow control to effectively like shave off a little bit of power. If you're right up against the line with what your power plant can output, that's a really effective way to fix that, is with using flow control. Since I have previous mods on here, you see that the effective change is only 5.2% on a beam laser that's already efficient modded. But that's, it's a high energy weapon, so 5.2% isn't nothing. Let's see what I try to put these in a reasonable order. So that's oversize and flow control. Okay, so there's some specific ones Yeah, let's talk about the ones for the other lasers. So phasing sequence, a lot of weapons can use this. I know pulse lasers can. So let's efficient mod and give it phasing sequence. So this lowers the total damage, but a portion of that damage is going to go right through shields and damage hull immediately. That can be pretty cool, but sometimes by the time you've dropped the shields on a ship, it's already at 90 or 95% hull. Also, sometimes with players that aren't prepared and don't know that this is happening, you could really freak them out. My hull is getting shot even though my shields are on. So that is phasing sequence. You can put that on a number of different things. Lasers, plasma can also use it, and that's pretty cool. Let's see, concordant and regen. Okay, so all the lasers can use concordant sequence. This increases thermal load, but it increases the shield regen of your wingmates if you shoot them with this. So you have to be in a wing for it to work, otherwise it'll consider the target to be hostile. It won't have that effect. But any of your wingmates, you shoot them with a laser with concordant, and for a period of time, their own shield's regen will be boosted. And that works for any laser. Now, specifically for the beam laser, there's another one called regeneration sequence. In this one, instead of increasing thermal load, regen sequence lowers the total damage of the weapon, but when you strike a wingmate with this weapon, it will essentially put its damage output as regeneration into their shield. So you train this on them for a number of seconds, and that whole time that you're shooting them with it, their shield you're pouring energy into their shield instead of draining it, which can be really effective. Used together, you increase the shield's natural regen rate with concordant and then shoot them with a regen sequence. Regen is the one that's going to be effective mid-combat. Concordant, like I said, because what it's doing is affecting the shield's the shield's own regeneration is what's being boosted. Your shields can't recharge if they're currently taking fire, so that one's not going to work mid-combat, but only in between. Another one for lasers, such as pulse lasers, is scramble spectrum. So this lowers the rate of fire a bit, but it will cause random malfunctions when you strike a target's hull. You never quite know what you're going to get, but if you suddenly got a thruster malfunction, the ship suddenly can't turn and can't change speed, and the modules recover from this, and then there's a cooldown period, and then you can reapply it again. So this is kind of a messing around with ships thing that you can do. And then burst lasers have one called inertial impact. It's what's interesting to me. I see a lot of kind of crossed information, and I'm not entirely certain what is true, but it says that it increases the damage by 62%. I know that inertial impact converts some of the damage to kinetic. It might be adding kinetic damage on top of the damage that's already there, and that might be why Coriolis is showing me 62% damage boost. But this is available for burst lasers. It does what it says. I mean, some of this damage is kinetic, and so it's changing the damage type a bit, but it adds 3 degrees of jitter. 3 degrees might not sound like much, but over the course of, the range of this is 3K. Over the course of 3,000 meters, 3 degrees is pretty meaningful. So it means you're going to have to be more up close in order to make those shots actually strike. But when they do, you are dealing more damage. So it's 46.2 is what it says, and without this effect. So yeah, it's claiming to increase the damage output by quite a bit. So that's interesting. I have not played around with that one all that much because the jitter does make it tough to hit shots. Not really what I have built a ship to do. Stripped down and double braced are experimentals that I don't use very much. One of them is going to lower the mass, so maybe you'd use that on your super fast and light builds. Double brace does the opposite, increases the integrity of a module. Okay, let's talk plasma and railguns. So let's flip this back to Plasma Accelerator. So we can do this first. Plasma Accelerator, we would always mod efficient, has a few things. It has the phasing sequence like we talked about, and then it's got thermal conduit. It's got several of the ones that we've already mentioned as being available. But we also have Dazzle. What Dazzle does is reduces when you strike a target, it reduces their sensor acuity for a certain amount of time, which means they're essentially like a lowered sensor range, where you'll start to slip off their scanners. I don't really know how effective that would be, because if you're in close combat with something, they're probably still going to be able to find you pretty easily, but depends maybe on your ship heat. Dispersal field. This is a pretty cool experimental. So when you strike a target for a period, probably like 10 seconds or something, I think it's actually the same as chaff. It has the effect of chaff, of scrambling gimbals, but basically that ship's gimbals are scrambled regardless of who they target or regardless of if they target anything at all. So you'll reduce that ship's damage output potential considerably with dispersal field. The other one that is available in Plasma is Target Lock Breaker. When you strike a target with this, they lose whatever target lock they had. They can regain it immediately, but they lose it. This is probably not a very big one for NPCs, since they kind of are computers and they can cheat, in quotes. I say cheat in quotes, but they kind of do. But really effective on players. It's irritating to lose your target because you've probably selected a module or something, and now you got to scroll through and select that again. The other interesting one that is available for Plasma accelerators is Plasma Slug. Plasma Slug lowers the total damage of the weapon, but it eliminates the use of ammo and it uses your ship's fuel instead. So it generates reloads from your ship's fuel. This is pretty cool. You can make plasma accelerators, and this is also available for railguns. You can make them essentially have infinite ammo, quote unquote infinite ammo, but because it's using your ship's fuel, be careful what ship you use that on. I find that its ideal place to use it is on something like the Crate Mark II. The Crate Mark II has a 32-ton fuel tank, and I've done calculations that I can load up a crate with like all plasma or like plasma and rails that all have Plasma Slug mod on them. And whereas I would normally have, sort of 100 rounds per gun, it's the total of the ship would be, you would have a little less than 500 rounds on that ship. Suddenly I found that I could fire like 1,500 rounds before expending my whole fuel tank. So that's a sweet spot. It's a good sweet spot. Anything larger than that would probably be effective too. Smaller ships with smaller fuel tanks might not be that great. I've experimented with it a little bit, adding extra fuel tanks to something like a Vulture, and it still didn't feel like I was able to stay in a Haz-Res any longer. So not great in those cases, but a build on a Crate Mark II with I've seen 4 railguns with Plasma Slug on them, and then a beam laser with thermal vent to effectively cool all that heat from the railguns can be a really effective and fun build. I have built that, and it is fun. So that brings us to railguns. We've sort of transitioned over because that's the other type of gun that can use Plasma Slug. So here's my railguns. I don't have Plasma Slug on these most of the time. That's just kind of for those specific things, like on a crate. It was fun. With railguns, I am pretty well always using the long range mod. The Plasma Slug build that I was talking about earlier could make good use of the short range mod. Because, like I said, you're spilling that heat out into ships with the thermal vent, and the Plasma Slug experimental on a railgun actually reduces your thermal load. So it makes up for the increased heat of the short range mod. Okay, but usually what I'm doing with railguns is I'm using long range, not plasma slug. I'm using long range, and that's because this weapon is essentially it's a projectile weapon, but it fires so fast that it's effectively hit scan. There's essentially zero travel time, like a laser. And that means it's actually really almost easier to use them at a high range. So with the long range mod, we get essentially no damage fall off, and the range is doubled out to 6K. It does increase power draw and mass. It says shot speed is increased. That's because the long range mod increases the shot speed of anything it's applied to, but that's meaningless for the railgun because it has no travel time to begin with. I'm pretty much always using long range, and then I'm, besides plasma slug, there are 2 experimentals that I'm using, and that is super penetrator, right here, or feedback cascade. Now, feedback cascade, super penetrator, and plasma slug all have the side effect of reducing thermal load by 40% on the railgun. This is a big deal because the railgun generates a ton of heat, and this makes them so much easier to use. And these are the 2 experimentals that you will get the most kind of benefit out of. So the way I've drawn up this FDL, it's got 2 railguns on it, and I've got one of each of those mods. So feedback cascade, this is the one that is for canceling shield cell banks. So it causes a 20% damage reduction from the weapon itself, but when somebody's trying to use a shield cell bank during that time when you can see the cell bank kind of rippling across the shield of the ship, that's its spool up time. If I'm landing railgun shots in that time, I'm canceling out up to 90% of that shield's cell bank's recharge. That's massive. It's a big deal in PvP especially, but will work on your NPCs too. So this railgun does 33.2 per shot. Sustained damage. No, damage per shot. Yeah, 33.2, because it can't fire more than once per second. That's reduced from 37.4 because of that feedback cascade. But if you imagine, if I'm adding 136 megajoules to my shield from each of these cell banks and I'm using this to cancel them, it's actually doing a lot more effective damage than what it says on the tin, so to speak. So that's effective for those for canceling cell banks and dealing a lot of effective damage to a ship. This one should be Super Penetrator. Super Penetrator is a mod that, once again, you have that reduction in thermal load. It increases the reload time. That's not hugely significant, but effectively what this mod is doing is the railgun has a super high penetration chance. So it's really good for shooting out modules on ships because it's super accurate, and you can bullseye a module and deal damage directly to that module. The Super Penetrator experimental will cause that railgun bolt or slug, or I don't know what to call them, to effectively travel all the way through the ship, damaging all the modules that are along its path. And so this is sort of like if I'm targeting the power plant on an enemy ship, I might need to be on the bottom of it in order to really make contact with that power plant. But with Super Penetrator, I could shoot at the ship from any angle. As long as I hit that power plant, I'm dealing damage to it. And I'm going to hit other modules along the way. This is really effective. This is a big thing for PvP, and it's really effective for quickly killing other ships, killing their FSDs. If you're doing assassinations or in a conflict zone, you'll get these scenarios where certain ships will come in. It'll be an enemy captain or something, and you need to destroy them. If they start to lose the fight, they'll run. And this will prevent them from running. Quickly shoot out their FSD in sometimes just a few shots. Okay, so those are the important experimentals. We've talked about plasmas and railguns and what and how, why and how to use them. I'm just going to break in here as I'm editing because I realized I did not mention multi-servos. Multi-servos is an experimental effect that I think you should never, ever use. It increases the fire rate of a weapon and also increases its power usage. So the difference in damage output and power usage is exactly the same as oversized, except it's getting that damage benefit by increasing your fire rate. So for weapons that consume ammunition, this means you're using more ammo and getting the same negatives as oversized. So in this case, never use multi-servos, use oversized instead. It's the same thing, but won't consume more ammo per second. Okay, back to our regularly scheduled program. So the other kinds of weapons that I don't get into that much. We talked. Missiles can be really effective. They have some experimentals which I should talk about. So let's change one of these to ordnance. So let's start with dumbfire. We're pretty much always going to use high capacity, I think, on these. It tends to be the best one. Emissive will cause the target to appear really brightly on sensors. So if you're having trouble keeping a lock on a ship that's running cool, emissive will fix that. FSD interrupt. This is a really interesting one, available just for dumbfires. It causes the FSD to reboot. So ships trying to run away from you, you tag them with one of these. Overload munitions converts some of the damage from explosive to thermal. So you can make missiles be essentially more effective as generalized damage because they're going to be partially thermal. I think it's 50-50 thermal and explosive, so deal more to shields. Penetrator payload causes an increase in module damage, and I think it's maybe even a wider range. So if you're using your missiles to shoot out like the drives and stuff, the thrusters on a ship, penetrator payload will make that more effective. Thermal cascade, pretty sure causes increased heat on the target. And then we've got kind of your typicals after that. Actually, we've got penetrator payload and penetrator munitions. I am going to look this up quickly. Okay, that's what I thought. So penetrator payload, according to the wiki, is just applied to torpedoes. I don't know why it's showing up here in Coriolis on a dumbfire missile. Anyway, it increases the hull penetration chance and damages multiple internal modules. That's just for this is a little sort of a Coriolis bug. But penetrator payload and penetrator munitions are somewhat the same thing, but one of them is only available for torpedoes, not missiles. But it's showing up here anyway. Let's switch to a seeker rack. Once again, high capacity is usually what we go for, because none of these. The reason I should say the reason is none of these others really increase your damage output that much or do anything else that we really want, unless it's like lightweight for something other than a combat ship. So we pretty much always go with high capacity. That's our total damage output going up. We have a few of the typical ones. The extra one that you can do on seeker missiles is drag. Drag munitions, which can also be applied to some of the kinetic weapons, like frag cannons can have drag, and that may be it. Drag munitions is a sort of a timed not a cooldown effect. It's a timed effect on your target that you can reapply right away, and it causes their ship to behave as though it has no pips in engines. So it'll make it much slower. It'll turn slower. Their boost recharge will be slower. It doesn't mean that they can't boost, but it does mean that recharge is pretty non-existent while they have this effect on them, and they're much slower. This can be very effective if you're trying to slow down a nimble ship. So you can apply that to seekers. Mines and torpedoes. Torpedoes are these slow-moving things with like a massive damage. Look at this, 10,000 piercing. Like they will always hit hull. They will, penetrate hull. They will always damage a bunch of modules and stuff like that. And the damage is pretty massive. you can't. The mods for them are weird. I haven't played with torpedoes very much, but they have like weird things like being able to mass lock ships. The big one for torpedoes is reverberating cascade. What this does is it causes the torpedo, and it's applicable to mines as well, it causes the torpedo or mine to directly damage the shield generator of the ship when you impact their shields. So a few of these can destroy. You're not taking out the shield, you're taking out the generator. So it can destroy the generator of a ship with shields much too large for you to ever have been able to take down with regular guns. But they are very slow moving. They have a long like arming time. It's just really hard to actually make contact, but boy oh boy, when you do, you can clean out the shields on a cutter or something with just a few hits, and that can surprise the hell out of people. The other thing that's going on here is mine launchers. These, again, they can be difficult to use because essentially they just drop in a fixed point in space. But if you can get a ship to chase you, and let's say we want high capacity on these too, there's a few interesting things we can do. We can use overload munitions, just like before, to convert some of the damage to thermal. But we have this, we have a bunch of things like a bunch of extras. Shift lock. The shift lock causes frame shift drives to reboot any ship that's caught in the blast radius of the mine. Again, I haven't played with mines all that much. This is more kind of a different use than like typical combat, right? So overload we talked about. Radiant canister adds heat, so it adds heat to the blast radius. Is not all that interesting. The ones that are interesting, again, reverberating cascade that damages the shield generator directly. And then the other one, this is exclusive to mines, is ion disruptor, which causes the thrusters of a ship to reboot. So this is, again, that would be a crazy thing. You hit somebody with an ion disruptor mine, or get them to run into it essentially, and their thrusters suddenly reboot. So they're offline for the time it takes them to reboot. So that's interesting. And then, like I said, the FSD interrupt is an effective one for dumbfires, and can also be applied to mines. Although it's called shift lock in that case. So let's quickly hit the power play modules. Again, not all of them, but if you're interested in combat, there's a lot of fun to be had in the power play modules. Particularly what you should do if you're starting off, if you haven't done any power play yet and you don't know where to go. What you want to do, I'm going to suggest that you pick either the pack hounds or the prismatic shield. So the prismatic shield is Aisling Duval. Whatever you're doing right now, just pause the video, and if you don't have either of these yet, just pick one and either pledge to the power play for Aisling Duval or Leong Ri. I have no idea if I pronounce that right. I've heard so many different ways of saying it. Anyway, so Leong is LYR is for the pack hounds, and Aisling Duval is for the prismatic shield. You want these. You want to unlock these. Just pick one and go for it. The pack hounds are a super fun seeker missile that fires 4 projectiles at the same time, and they are what they call drunk seekers, so they sort of wiggle all around on their way there. The only thing that will break the lock on seekers, you can't even break it by going into silent running or throwing a heat sink or something. Chaff will not screw up the lock on seeker missiles. The only thing that will do it is the ECM countermeasure, which goes on a utility mount. So it's a separate thing that ships have to have. Sometimes you see ships with them, but pack hounds can be very effective. I use them on my Corvette. I essentially have a bunch of gimbaled multi-cannons, And if somebody's popping chaff and I'm not landing enough of my multi-cannon shots, that's when I use my pack hounds. And that's sort of that's my damage for when somebody's using gimbals. They would be really effective. The DPS is really high on them compared to a typical seeker. They do, produce more heat, but they can have all the experimentals. They can have drag, they can have overload. Those are typically the ones that I use. I use sort of a mix of both of those. Overload making them more effective than they usually are against shields, since they do partially thermal damage. Missiles being explosive, it's a real good way to shoot out drives and stuff like that. So those are effective. And then, of course, the prismatic shield is the A-rated shield with extra power consumption and extra total power. So those are the big ones. After that, after those two modules, I really like the pacifiers, which is a size 3 fixed frag cannon that deals less damage per pellet, but the spread and the spread is narrower and the shot speed is higher. So in a lot of cases, you can get more of those pellets to actually land on your target. And, I found that they're can be really effective, especially on something like a vulture or a chieftain, which has really good use of size 3 weapon slots. The enforcer is a really fun one. This is a size 1 fixed multi-cannon with a slower fire rate but much higher damage and piercing and stuff like that. I don't know what to say about it. It's a lot more effective than it seems like it's going to be. So that's a fun one to check out. I have liked advanced plasma accelerators. This is a plasma accelerator that fires. Each shot is lower damage, but it fires 3 times as fast and has 3 times the ammo. If you are maintaining time on target and actually landing all your shots, it can do something like 140% of the total damage of its regular plasma accelerator counterpart. It's just available in a size 3. The question is whether you can really keep your time on target. If you're doing any kind of like jousting or doing an attack pass and then swinging back around for another one, the regular plasma accelerators is going to be better for that, because the slower fire rate doesn't matter, because you're swinging around for another pass. But Vulture is, I think, Vulture and perhaps the Chieftain are effective ships for that advanced plasma because they have size 3s again, and they're very maneuverable, so you can typically keep your time on target very well with a ship like that. I have really liked the Cyto Scrambler. This is a weird one and a lot of people don't like it, but this is a size 1 fixed burst laser. And I think it has like extra jitter on it, but it's totally ineffective against hull. Like, it is just modified so that it won't do any damage to hull no matter what. Even if you put that inertial impact special mod, I think people have tried it and it still doesn't really damage hull, but it does 200% damage to shields. So get these things, modify them for, it's a very short range weapon because of that extra jitter. But modify them like efficient or something to get the extra damage bonus. I don't think long range would be an effective mod on them because the jitter is much too wide. But for a size 1 hardpoint, nothing does more shield damage, and shields are not there's no damage penalty for shields for the armor value and stuff like that. So I think Cyto Scramblers can be cool. The Imperial Hammer is a power play railgun that fires a 3-round burst, very quick succession. I didn't get on very well with this weapon, but some people really like them. The heat is higher, so I tend to recommend a sturdy mod on those to lower the heat generation, and then you could lower it further with something like Super Penetrator or Feedback Cascade. It's sort of like if you have trouble landing the railgun shots, you might find this weapon a little more forgiving in that sense, because you have this 3-round burst, so you might land part of the shot. It depends on how you use it. The other one to mention is the containment missile, which is from Uri Grom, also commonly called the Grom Bomb. This is a dumbfire missile that has essentially an enhanced version of the FSD interrupt effect, causing FSDs to reboot. It lasts longer from the containment missile. and technically you could put the FSD interrupt effect on it, and people have done tests and found that it does slightly increase the length of that effect if you really wanted to maximize it. But you could use some other experimental at the same time instead if you wanted to. So that's my notes for shipbuilding and weapons. Almost everything has the same rules, but becomes more effective this way. And we can shape our builds a lot in ways that we really couldn't before. Builds are really sort of wide open. And by now, I think at this point, you've tried fixed weapons. You should be getting into fixed weapons a bit. It would not make sense for you to kind of be not trying fixed weapons, because they're much increased damage and you're getting access to a bunch of new stuff, very fun stuff. I think plasma is a ton of fun if you can get used to it at all. Plasma combined with railguns, there's a reason that is sort of quote unquote the meta for damage output, because with the railguns, modding them for long range, you can tag targets very far away pretty easily, and they have no way of escaping you, except hiding behind a rock. And then up close, the plasma just does this massive damage. Can be a little tricky to learn, but I think it's worth doing. So that's about it. The other thing that I was going to try to do here is do some battles in the conflict zone, and to show you, we talked about the basic sort of flight maneuvers and things like that in the last video. So I'm going to kind of be using all this in the conflict zone, but I'm going to do it in the context of the conflict zone. It's totally different than a res site, even a has-res, because you have an entire team of enemy ships that are all against you, so you don't have to aggravate them to get them to chase after you, and the rest of the ships won't ignore you. So you do have allies in there, but you have a whole team that can gang up on you, and that's where people get caught off guard. That's why it's so much different. So I'm thinking that it's time that we head out there. I'm going to flip back to my game screen here, and let's pick out a ship. Let's see, what do I want to do? Okay, so I'm back in my game. I'm going to switch ships. And I parked near some conflict zones. So I think maybe the first thing I should take out is my chieftain. So for this chieftain build, I'm using plasma accelerators, and then in the smalls, I'm using the enforcer cannons. And, that just reminds me, I forgot some very important special effects. Let's transition back over here. Multi-cannons have some very fun, there are some of actually frags and things like that. A bunch of the kinetic weapons have some other fun special effects. So let's say that we modified this overcharged. Here it is, corrosive shell. The one I missed, I don't know how that didn't make it into my notes. So corrosive shell lowers your ammo maximum by 20%, but it applies this corrosive debuff when you strike a hull with it. Now, what that debuff does is essentially lowers their armor hardness, which means all incoming damage to that ship's hull is boosted by 20%. So even from your wingmates, if one of your wingmates has corrosive shell and hits a ship with it, for the duration of the effect, which is something on the order of 10 seconds or whatever, all incoming damage is increased. This is a big deal. So for example, let's flip back quickly to my... well, this isn't actually the effective build that I have on this ship. I don't know what's going on. What was I thinking here? So my Corvette actually has all multi-cannons and pack hounds. And what I've done is typically I take one of these smalls and I've put multi-cannons in these spots. So let's throw some gimbaled multi-cannons in here. And then I want one of them to be corrosive. You really only need one. There's no point to having multiple multi-cannons with corrosive. But let's modify one with high capacity and then corrosive. So now we've made up for the difference in ammo. So now, even though it has that -20, it's still got more ammo than a typical multi-cannon. So compared to the 2100 rounds, this has 3360. And we're really not relying on this multi-cannon for its own damage, but because it has that corrosive, it's increasing the damage of all the other guns, all my guns, all my wingmates' guns, all my teammates' guns. That's a big deal. So that was, I'm glad I switched over to this chieftain. Okay, so back here, so this chieftain has enforcer cannons, and you see I've got corrosive just on the one. And then the rest of them we're just using for damage. It's the enforcer is a pretty. Oh, I have limpets in my inventory. Let's just save time by trashing those. Okay, now I can go into this ship, huh? All right, getting into it now, and I hear my dog barking. I hope that continues. Okay, so here we go. So let's take this chieftain out. So for this chieftain, I'll do a quick look at the modules and stuff that are in here. So I do have this chieftain is built with quite a bit of armor. It's got a bi-weave shield and shield boosters. So it's got a reasonable shield, but trying to go for a fast recharge. I did put a cell bank in here just because the more armor you load a ship up with, and this chieftain has a lot of room for armor, the heavier it gets. So, I just filled one of the spots with a cell bank and thought, I'll try to maybe get some more shield strength kind of that way. And I do have a heat sink on here, so I will be able to use that cell bank with a heat sink. It's just a single bank, so I won't be doubling. You'll see I also chose the B-rated cell bank. The B-rated actually has more cells than the A. So you can do more recharges with a B compared to an A. They aren't as much megajoules, as much pure energy per charge, but there's more of them. So usually the B is actually a way to get more maximum charge. But if you're really trying to deploy as much charge as you can as quickly as you can, the A can be better. But it might depend on your power usage, stuff like that. So let's launch and go find ourselves a conflict zone. I know there's some nearby. So the chieftain, I like to recommend the chieftain as kind of a. I like to recommend the chieftain as maybe your first medium dedicated combat ship. You may be getting into what is your first conflict zone. So let's start with a low. It's going to be sort of the easiest one. It doesn't have as many of the. It tends to not have as many of the kind of other side things that you have to do, and hopefully I'll be able to show off the ship. The Chieftain, I think, is a really good choice for your first dedicated combat ship. That's a medium, I should say, first medium. It has a pretty forgiving flight model. It's a good balance of speed and still being quite maneuverable. It's not really slanted one way or the other. And there's a variety of hardpoints on here. It has 2 size 3s, it has 1 size 2, and 3 size 1s. So it does kind of force you to make some choices there. Now I've put plasma in the size 3s and the 2, just again so that I only had. Some people put a railgun in that size 2, which is a really good use for a size 2 slot, but I try like crazy to only have 2 fire groups, or only 1 fire group, which I can use with 2 triggers. So if I can help it, that's what I try to do. So I'll probably need some pips into weapons. We'll try to manage that as we go. Okay, so ships start appearing, and I'm going to pick my side here in a second. So when that pops up in my comms panel, I'm going to fight for loose screws. And now we see all the red and green have appeared here. So basically, I just want to start in on some things. Oh, a bunch more ships have popped in. So Cobra. I'm going to look around, see if I can find something bigger. I like to hunt the big stuff. Oh, there's a chieftain's already getting some fire. When I'm out here, I'm going to want to try to stick close to the greens. I want there to be teammates around me to help me take the fire. So here's what the enforcers are going to look like on my ship. I think I have the red. So I'm going to try to apply that corrosive to him. It's a little bit far away. Come on. There, I've applied the corrosive, and then I hit him with the plasma, so those plasma are going to do extra damage. So he's on me now. I'm going to try to rotate down and spiral out of his ray, but he's using lasers, so I'm going to try to hit him with the plasma. And he just circled and dodged me a little bit. There we go. There we go. Oh, got his thruster a little bit there. Try to boost out of his way, and now, because our velocity's matched, and he's facing somebody else, and now I can really pile on the damage onto him here. Oh. The shields came back. Let's hit him again. So the size 2 slot on the chieftain is on the bottom, and everything else is on the top. So he's acting like his drives are shot out. He's just floating in a straight line. Seemingly, oh no, he's moving a little bit. I don't know what's going on with this guy. That's very strange. So we're just going to finish him off. Come on, plasma reload. There we go. So you see the plasma, the size 3s are on the top, and then the size 2 is on the bottom. It's still a pretty tight grouping because all of these Alliance ships have a very tight grouping. We'll finish him off with the Enforcer cannons. There we go. All right, now I wonder if he actually did lose his thrusters, and that's why he was drifting off like that, because we got very far away from the group. What I wanted to show was maybe see if I can get myself into some trouble and then have to steer back toward the greens. So I'm going to constantly be keeping an eye on my sensor and try to, if I get into trouble, steer back to where there's a lot of greens. And don't be afraid to peel off of an enemy you're targeting. So here's some ships that are off by themselves. Here, this guy, I'm hunting for ships that have already been engaged by other teammates and hopefully have already lost their shields, because I basically want to eliminate ships kind of as quickly as possible. So go for the ones that are already weakened. So Viper is proving a bit evasive, but I got him that time. That thump. Ooh, miss. See, I see incoming missiles from my teammates. And hit with the plasma. There we go. Did he lose thrusters too? Let's try to find his thrusters. Oh, yep, see, drives are at 0. This keeps happening when you use a lot of missiles. You will eliminate the drives on ships, and then they do this. They go drifting out into space, and I actually have to boost to chase him. Try to finish him off. I think I only made contact with the bottom plasma that time. Let's try it again. There we go. Come on. And I keep trying to reapply that corrosive effect to make sure my plasma is doing its maximum damage. He's getting far away from me. See, he's moving so fast when his drives got shot out that I'm having trouble keeping up with him. The Enforcers have a pretty good range. Oh, see? He drifted too far out. Okay. Well, that was a waste. Yeah, there's ups and downs to shooting out the drives on a ship. If they're going, 500 meters a second in one direction, when their drives get shot out, you may not be able to keep up with them. At least not very easily. Right, so I'm going to fly back toward the zone. I got very far away from it. Hopefully I will edit this out. I'm dropping back into the conflict zone now, because the first time I got to chasing a ship that had its drive shot out and got too far away, and the whole instance bugged out and essentially quit. So now we're gonna start over. And unfortunately, I've spent a little bit of ammo, but hopefully it's not too bad. Okay, right off the bat, we've got an enemy anaconda. Let's jump in. So I'm gonna go ahead and
Welcome aboard, Commander.
target his frame shift drive. Make sure he doesn't get away. Once his shields drop, I'll start doing damage directly to that. And opened up with a pretty bad shot. But a bunch of my maneuvers I'm gonna keep in mind. Same as when we were in the res sites. I'm gonna try to stay on his tail. He's dealing with a bunch of other targets, so it's not that difficult. I'm managing my throttle, making sure I don't overshoot him, if at all possible. And I probably shouldn't be spending all of my Enforcer cannon ammo when his shields are still up, because they really don't do very much damage until we hit the hull. That's when they get really effective, because of the keeping that corrosive effect on it, which is magnifying the damage of all my teammates and everybody. So right now I'm kind of trying to see, he did a reverse turn on me, but I went kind of full throttle, and I'm not really needing to boost, although he just got quite a bit of distance on me. So I'm going to boost and thrust away, kind of like this, stay out of his firing arc, and we'll boost again. Hopefully we don't get into too much of a joust, but I can hit him here in the meantime. And my plasmas are reloading, so he's definitely focusing on me now more. He actually landed a shot that time. And we're kind of doing this boosting orbits with flight assist on. I'm going to reapply my corrosive and then hit him with some plasma. And he's going down pretty soon here. 18% hull. Let's hit the plasma. Oop. Oh, so he turned on me and I shot too soon. So he's... There we go. So you see the two lead reticles I have. That's because I've got fixed weapons, but they have different projectile speeds. So the Enforcers have a higher projectile speed than a typical multi-cannon, so that's the reticle that's closer to the ship. And then the plasma, which only goes, I think, a little over 800 meters a second, is the much farther away reticle. So I decide which one I'm aiming at before I pull the trigger, right? There, mostly hit him with that. And lean up and get the plasma shot in there. He's almost done. Wail on him with the Enforcers. There we go. So he's exploding. Yay. Bang. All right. Here's a python. He's kind of far away. Let's find something closer. Here's an asp that's closer. He's got somebody to tangle with out here. You know, he got his shields back, and then I very quickly eliminated them with a nice volley of plasma. One of my Enforcers was reloading there for a second. There we go. Now we got all three. And try to... Oh, I got surprised by that. I got caught in a little bit of a stall, and I should have been able to hit him with plasma on that pass, but I didn't keep my throttle in the right spot. So he's turning on me, and he's going to try to make a pass, and I'm going to try to find the right time to lean up and hit the plasma as he goes by, just like that. Sounds good. Okay, so he's turned away from me. It's going to make things a little easier. So he's reapply our corrosive, and then aim for the plasma shot. Gotcha. And that'll do it. All right, next target.
You're on a roll, Commander.
Let's go. Oh, I like that, actually. This is a Viper 4 that's engaged with a teammate of mine. I can see from the sensor there that he's shooting at one teammate and he's already taken some damage, so I can hopefully help my teammate finish this fight off. So the Viper is a nimble little guy, even the Viper 4, so I am going to want to be closer before I let plasma volleys go, so I can make sure they hit like that. And I want to kind of maintain the speed and be careful about when I boost, because I don't want to get caught as the one who boosted too soon. He's got railguns. Oop. I'm going to try an FA off turn, and then I'm going to try to boost to catch back up with him, and I think on this pass I can hit him with the plasma. Gotcha. And I'll boost back again because I see that he just boosted a second before me, so that's good. Try to get the enforcers lined up. There we go. Okay, so he's turning back onto me. Can get ahead of it. Gotcha. If I wait too long to aim up for the plasma, and that was a badly timed boost and I overshot him. If I wait too long to aim up for the plasma, I'll miss it. And my ship won't be able to turn fast enough. So I'll tag him with enforcers and lean up for the plasma. We got him. And keep that corrosive on him. Oh, only one of the plasmas landed there. Okay, this is probably a little bit of a late boost that I did, but he was really far away and I wanted to keep it close. I'm going to try to make one more good pass here, and I'm using my thruster to... Yeah, see, he boosted. And I couldn't quite keep up with that turn. There we go. Oops, bad shot. Aim up and thrust up. Yeah, didn't quite keep it. So now I'm sort of stuck in a stall. I'm flying backwards a little bit away from him, but he's focused on some other target, so I'm not going to boost because I'll overshoot again. Instead, I'm going to just come in under normal thrusters and line up on his backside. He boosted, so I'm going to throttle up and blast him. Almost got the shields down on that shot. There they go. And now he's got corrosive on him, so now I hit him with that plasma and it does the real damage. And we can finish it off right here. Boosting again. I'm not going to bother boosting to keep up because the chieftain's fast enough. I'll just stay with him and finish him off. All right, there we go. All right, I'm going to try to fly to where there's a crowd of red. I'd really like to demo getting in trouble and needing to retreat to the greens. So who are you? Okay, so here's a deadly asp. And there's 3 enemies around here and only 1 green. So if I engage them, I may get ganged up on, which is what I want to show. All right, so here we've got the attention of this asp. I'm actually going to add some shield pips and do a plasma shot right there. Got you. And increase systems and increase engines again now that I'm behind him. There, shields are down. And he's taking fire from my wingmate. Now see, I came here because there was a bunch of enemies and now there's only 1. So I'm applying that corrosive and then hitting him with the plasma. Looks like one of them didn't fire that time. Oh, because I don't have enough pips and weapons. It is hard recording and talking at the same time as I'm doing this. So I'm taking a bit of shield damage now. Not enough to really be worried about. Again, I think this is probably... Because it's a low intensity conflict zone, it's not that much of a challenge for me in this chieftain. That's a very far away off ship. So here's a Python out by himself. He's very far away. So I want to find something closer. Here we go. My shields are having plenty of time to recharge between these bouts because I was not successfully ganged up on. Alright. Trying to stick with him. Alright, so boosted. I went ahead and just throttled up instead of boosting because I did not want to overshoot. Try to get that plasma shot off. There we go. Just made it. Gotta learn the turn rate of your ship with its current thrusters and figure out when it's going to be the time when he's making this pass up here like that. So we did a little FA off spin, and now I'm going to boost to catch back up with him and hit him. Ah, so close. All right, so he's right there. I realized a little too late that he had turned on to me and we were going to suddenly joust, and I didn't pre-turn in time. But I didn't boost so that I maintained my maximum thruster control here, and I was able to stay with him and not overshoot. And now the same thing's going to happen. Yep, and I missed it. So we're going to little FA off turn. I went to blue zone, FA off, complete the turn, FA back on, and boost. And here we go. He turned to me again. So we're going to try to just let it be a jousting boost here. Should turn on my night vision in case it's difficult to see on the video. It's quite easy for me to see the ships. Yeah, that was a miss. Quite easy to see the ships in my headset, but I don't know how well it's coming out on the video. All right, so let's just go full throttle here for a minute instead of boosting, since he's focused on somebody else. And I see that I've run out of ammo with the Enforcer cannon that has corrosive on it, which is not nice, but we can synth that ammo here in a second. I want to hit this shot. The Viper 4 for the size can have a really high armor. There we go. Hit him with at least one of the big ones that time. And I saw he did a boost, so let's hit him. Oof, boy, that's nice armor on that Viper. All right. No. Okay, so trying to fix this joust situation we have here. And that was just a miss. That was just a miss. All right, but now we're closer because I didn't boost past him that time. So now we can definitely hit him. Yeah, let's try to... Yeah, he boosted toward me. That means I can boost now and get behind him, hopefully. Gotcha. There we go. All right, we're kind of out of the action here, so... Oh, we've won. Okay, good. So let's return and rearm, and then let's try a medium. And I think maybe I'll get out the FDL for this one. Okay, here we are on the FDL. This is not specifically built for conflict zones, but this is pretty much, I think, the build that we were looking at in Coriolis earlier. And it will be fine. It will be fine at conflict zones. We'll find ourselves a medium this time. See if we can get into a little more danger. The FDL I consider to be a little bit more advanced. Probably shouldn't be your first medium dedicated combat ship, as it's a little touchier to fly and it can stall out really easily. The turn speed is very, very high, and it's just sort of like faster and touchier. All right, here we are at the conflict zone. Now remember I said that this ship has power priorities. All right, so let's pick a side. Loose screws, please. All right, here's our baddies. Highest threat. Ooh, a Challenger. Let's see what else is out here first.
Welcome aboard, Commander.
Ooh, Anaconda. So I'm going to go ahead and target his frameshift drive right away, and then I don't have to think about that. Okay, so this build is what I've kind of talked about before. This is railguns and plasma accelerators. 3 on the right side, and then the 2 railguns in the medium slots on the left. Let's get into it. One of my weapons is hit scan, the railguns. That's going to be most effective for... Oh, I missed with the big one. That stinks. Most effective for when the shields go down, so I'll use that. If I keep my fire rate under control, I don't need that many pips in weapons. And so far he's getting hit from all sides here. I can use some railgun shots too to increase my damage while I'm far out. There we go. This is just a dangerous Anaconda. There we go, shields down. So now we're gonna start tagging that frameshift drive if we can with the railguns. And we're just putting out some damage. You see that my... Ooh, almost got it. We're not that concerned because I don't really think this guy's gonna run. There we go, I hit it a little bit that time. Let's try for the plasma shot. Here we go. Gotcha. Ooh, Spec Ops. Okay, here's where things are going to start to get interesting. Because enemy Spec Ops are very tough, highly engineered ships. There will be 4 of them, and you get a lot of bonus points for taking them out, but you will be in trouble if they gang up on you. Alright, high temp warning. I'm gonna look for that Spec Ops just as soon as I finish taking this guy out. Let's get him once more with the big one. Jeez. If you hear my dog there, she's having a great time. Alright. So I'm not really under a strong attack here. I'm gonna go looking for the Spec Ops. Okay, so here's one of the Spec Ops. Let's start with you. Turn on night vision to make it easier to see. Alright. Expect ships to be tougher in here. Ah, see, I'm under attack by a different Spec Op, so I'm going to switch to that. Since I already have the attention of this guy. So I'm going to sort of boost and rotate, and my wingmen are firing on him. Oh, the dogs have decided to come down here and play, so you may hear them growling. They're all having a great time. They just make these sounds. So my apologies for the dog sounds. So I'm kind of letting this guy take fire from my teammates while he pays attention to me, and I can tank that fire, so I'm just sort of like evading and keeping him busy. Here we are. Let's try to actually land a shot. Got him there. And the railgun, yeah, it's a little close. I don't like trying to hit with the railgun quite this close. But this guy is taking a pounding. Okay, here we go. Oh, dogs. Can you guys go upstairs, please? There we go. So there's one Spec Ops down. let's go find the other ones. All right.
Another one down.
These guys will do the most damage, so I'm going to take them out first. So I can hit at quite range with the railgun, so I'll take an opportunistic shot like that. Try to up thrust and tighten this turn. That slows me down too, and he's hardly moving, so I didn't want to... I wanted to let the FDL kind of absorb that speed. And I'm using my thruster always again to push toward the engines. And I hit him with that, hit him, oop. He boosted on me. So I missed the opportunity to take a plasma shot, but the railguns are nice because I don't have the lead indicator. Oh, see, he's using a cell bank, so I'm gonna hit him with the railguns. Feedback cascade. There we go. I got one shot in, reducing the effectiveness of his cell bank. All right, so his shields are down. Try to get one more. Got him. All right. See how much my shield is draining the system's capacitor. It is a big shield I have on this ship, so when it needs to charge, it drains the system's capacitor quite a bit, but I'm not that worried about it because the shields are in good shape. Okay, here we go. Now we can make an attack pass. You. Gotcha. Let's hit him with a railgun. And he's boosting out. Oh, I was about to fire, and then I heard him blowing up. Okay, so there's two down. Ah, an FDL. All right, you're dangerous, so let's take you out. So far, I'm not seeing... Well, this might be it. Let's hit him on the way in. Just timing that trigger lag. All right, he's got gimbaled multi-cannons. Oops. He turned unexpectedly. I should have predicted that, but I didn't. Okay. So let's thrust to even out the vector long enough to get my plasma shot off. Gotcha. All right, now I didn't boost this time, although he did, so maybe I should have, but let's see. So I'm using lots of side thruster to sort of confuse the situation a little bit. And there we go. I caught him going in a straight line. I was able to hit him with all three plasma accelerators. I think I can get him with this. Oh, like that. Yes. So we're just sort of hitting him with everything we have, taking a lot of fire, but FDL has a good shield. And I do want to kind of take the fire so that I can try to show off the cell banks here soon. Because even though this isn't a prismatic, I did put 2 cell banks on it. Alright, so we're boosting and thrusting up to shrink that lead reticle. Okay, he's using cell banks, so I'm going to cancel them. Oh, I only got 1 shot in, so that he had a pretty rapid charge going on that cell bank. But I did get one shot in, so I canceled some of it. All right, shields are down. Let's find his frame shift drive while he shoots me. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and use my double bank. So we're gonna heat sink and then double. All right, there. My heat's gonna go way up, but I'm gonna get a lot of a shield charge out of it. See those shields come right back up. All right, and now that charge is done happening. Alright, now that I've demoed that, I'm going to stop trying to take so much fire. I think I'm going to do it again. Alright, 2 cell banks. Yeah, and I boosted at the same time to try to avoid fire, so I did take a little bit of heat damage there, but it's okay. Spec Ops is not an easy guy. I would very much like to hit him with plasma right now. So this would probably be a good time to lead him back to where all the greens are, because we are pretty far from everybody, and I am getting totally concentrated on here. So I'm going to add pips to shields and sort of kite him back to where I want him to be, which is in the midst with lots of other green targets. Alright, so now let's boost back around, and now he's engaged with some other targets. So now I can hit him. So we've almost got his frame shift drive. You see that little micro gimbaling effect that's happening when I'm at long range with the railguns. That's what makes them so effective to use at long range. See if I can finish off his frame shift. There we go, 0%. So you're not going anywhere. At this point I could switch to power plant if I wanted to. Let's use the plasma. Oh no. Alright. There we go. I want to finish this off. Tough little ship. Power plant down to 65%. Oop. Good hit. Okay. %, 0%. So at this point, if he was a player, he'd be experiencing a malfunction. I can sometimes get the ships to blow up early by triggering a malfunction in the power plant after it goes out, but it looks like he's going to be around. Still able to fire his guns and everything. All right, this ought to do it. There we go. Spec Ops 3 is down. All right, let's find the last one. I don't see one. Oh, we must have taken out the Spec Ops. All right, so here's a Challenger. I'm letting my shields charge a bit with lots of pips into systems, but now we're gonna need those, so I'm gonna switch them back and hit him. Let's find this guy's power plant. I'd just like to have a target for the, oh, get those shields back and gone again. Little bump. Alright, so he boosted. I'll tag him with the rails. See if I can hit that power plant. Nope. And he's gonna crash into me. Well, I'm gonna win that fight right now with my shield still up. Oh, I think he lost his drives. He's just spinning aimlessly. So now we want to try to take him out as quickly as possible before he drifts away from battle. And I'm going to pump pips into weapons so I can keep my plasma going. And, well, they... 1%, huh? Alright. Railgun will do it. No? Tough little thing. Okay, there we go. Charge that systems capacitor back up. Alright, so that's what's reading as highest threat. Kind of off by yourself. Let's not. Let's boost back into town here. Alright, so here's a cluster of enemies. Let's hit one of these guys, because I think we're in a little crowd here, and hopefully we can get ganged up on. I'm gonna check my cell bank ammo. So I've got 2 left in each bank. Oh, that was a bad shot. I was expecting him to be boosting up instead of straight. That was a very silly thing to expect. Now, see, I did a little gentle corkscrew to avoid his plasma round. So we'll boost and up thrust to tighten that, get that plasma shot in. And so he's using a lot of... oh, battle 1. Alright, we finished him off. I'll try to take out this one last ship before they all escape. So as he's running, the railguns are often the easiest thing to hit with. Not getting blinded by his boost. Oh, he got away. All right. Cool. So that's the size of it. Hopefully that's an okay demo of what it's like in an engineered ship in a more dangerous fight than just a Haz-Res. With against the spec ops that could actually manage to take me out if I wasn't careful. And you'll see my shields never went down, but I'm sitting here at 88% because in conflict zones you will find engineered NPCs, and some of them had phasing damage. They were shooting right through my shield sometimes. And I'm going to go back to my carrier. And while I do, there she is. Is there anything in my notes? I will look back at my notes. Is there anything in here that I have not gone over? Yeah, we demoed some module targeting, cycling through. Usually, FSD, if you're worried about them escaping, shoot out the FSD first. Guided missiles can be effective. The railguns, as you see with the super penetrator, I can hit from any angle and deal considerable damage directly to those modules, and they're really easy to do that at long range with the long range mod because that little micro gimbling effect that you saw. Keeping an eye on the sensor in those conflict zones, being experienced at it, I really didn't let myself get caught off guard, but I remember early days when I wasn't as experienced at combat getting caught with a crowd of 3 or 4 red triangles around me, makes things really, really tough, and you can get shot down surprisingly fast. If those spec ops gang up on you more than one at a time, that's bad news. I did get to lead one back to the thing. He was much more difficult to fight one-on-one because he's always trying to attack me, but leading the enemy back to where there's a bunch of other green sensor dots, they started being engaged by my teammates, and that made it much easier to take them out. So that's a technique you should be using liberally. And just that kind of macro positioning in a conflict zone, thinking about where you are as opposed to the crowd of ships, not just your individual target. So hopefully you found this to be useful, and once these are out in the wild and get viewed, we'll watch the comments and watch in Discord, in the Loose Screws Discord, for feedback, and I can create some more, or perhaps other live events related to additional questions and things like that. So thanks very much for watching. I'm Commander J on Tracks. You can find us in the Loose Screws Discord anytime, and join us. Have some fun together in space.